Alright guys, Witch Queen is coming up real fast, and just a short 12 days after its release, we will get to experience day 1 of its featured raid. Day 1 raids can be emotional, unrelenting, draining, demoralizing, but above all, extremely rewarding. Not anyone can just jump into a day 1 raid and find success. You need to have a good amount of character and subclass knowledge, problem solving skills, but the most obvious one, you need to have the right weapons. So let's talk about that. G'day Guardians, it's Matt here and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be diving into all the weapons and perks that I think are going to be necessary to have on standby if you are tackling the day 1 Witch Queen raid. The goal here is to be best prepared for any kind of encounter that Bungie throws at us. You don't want to be that player in the fire team who has rocked up without a good level of preparation or even just some forethought for the day 1 raid, especially if you're gunning for world first. We won't necessarily be diving into god rolls, but more into weapon rolls that provide utility in different and unique situations when it comes to raid encounters. The list is compiled from what has worked well in previous day 1 raids, mixed in with what works efficiently today, and then previously weapon strats and metas from the past. This isn't going to be a 100% certainty list for being ready for the day 1 raid. There might be some weapons that we get in that first week of the expansion that push all of these weapons aside, or maybe there'll be weapons that we can craft that have everything that we'll ever need. The idea for this video is more or less getting prepared for worst case scenarios and to have what we can ready. So I'm going to be breaking down weapons into different utility and purpose categories. I'm not diving into specific archetypes because frankly some archetypes on weapons are useless and don't provide anything extra, different, or anything more than the ones that I'm going to be mentioning do. I'm listing literally the best of the best, so if something's missing from these lists, it's probably for that reason. I just wanted to mention before I start diving into the weapons is that aside from this video, there's a couple great resources to help you with tracking weapons and having a bit of a visual checklist for getting weapons ready for Witch Queen. DestinyRecipes.com has a really great targeted weapons checklist that features plenty from this video and other ones that they recommend for specific reasons. There's also Tyler Croissant, who has provided a really good Google Doc with a really good checklist system where you can tick off weapons that you've got along the way. I'll include both of these in the description because they are fantastic for the Destiny community right now. Alright, kicking off the list, we have got 2 boss DPS shotguns which are really effective at dealing damage, especially if someone in the fire team is using Divinity for an accessible crit bubble. These are only good if you can fight a boss at close range, preferably in a Lunar faction well. This of course is Heritage and First In Last Out, both tried and tested slug shotguns. For Heritage, you'll be looking for anything with Reconstruction, but Reconstruction and Recombination will give you the best damage output. For the First In Last Out, you'll want auto-loading and Vorpal, and with both shotties here, Assault Mag raises your RPM slightly if you want to go full optimal. You can get Heritage from the second and third encounter from the Deepstone Crypt raid, and First In Last Out is unfortunately a world drop, so you will have to make sure to spend all those gunsmith materials with Banshee. Both of these have proven to be very useful in things like oracles in the Vault of Glass as well, and shooting the eyes of the Consecrated Mind in Garden of Salvation. In addition to those boss DPS shotguns, we do have some shotgun options for ad clearing. Sometimes it takes too long to whittle down packs of ads with primary ammo, or to even deal with mages that pop in and out of encounters. So these options come in handy to thin the herd a little bit, or to help pack a punch if you're ever in a pinch. That's a lot of P's. First up is my personal favorite, the Comedian, and that's because it can be a one-stop shop for all of your needs. You'll want Subsistence in that third column, and either Vorpal Weapon or Trench Barrel in the last column. The Subsistence part of this will be perfect for ad clearing, and the other 2 perks will help deal with champions or mages. You'll be able to get yourself an adept version of this from farming some Grandmasters before Witch Queen rolls around. An alternative to having to do Grandmasters would be farming some Dares of Eternity to get yourself a copy of the Wastelander M5. Similarly with Subsistence and Trench Barrel or Subsistence and 1-2 Punch, at the very least I'd have a Fractithist or an Eye-Killer shotgun, either having Lead from Gold and Trench Barrel for some very bare minimum utility in comparison to those other 2 shotguns. Next on the list are blinding grenade launchers. These grenade launchers are good at doing crowd control because they essentially stop the enemies from doing anything for a short moment, which is really useful if you're getting overrun or need a breather to control ads. There are two really good options in the kinetic slot. You have Ignition Code, which is fantastic if you get something like Ambitious Assassin or Field Prep to cover those reload speeds, but ultimately you'll want Slide Shot because it doesn't seem to have any sort of cooldown. You can literally slide, shoot, repeat. The other option is Pardon Our Dust with auto loading on it. Both of these can roll with Vorpal Weapon 2 for some extra added damage on bosses. In the energy slot, there's Truth Teller and Empty Vessel. Both of these you'll obviously want blinding, but also auto-loading. Ignition Code can be focused through Humble Engrams, and Pardon Our Dust is easy enough to farm through Dares of Eternity and Treasure Keys. Truth Teller is a world drop, so make sure you spend those gunsmith materials with Banshee, but Empty Vessel is one that I wouldn't stress about obtaining, since farming a blinding auto-loading roll is near impossible, since it has such a small chance to drop at the end of a Vanguard strike, and on top of that small drop rate, you also run the very small percent chance it's going to be a roll that you want. Next up are snipers that provide good burst DPS for bosses. These snipers are a great option for day one because the contest mode will hit us hard with how much damage that we're going to take, so it might be safer to deal damage from a distance, and depending on what bosses we have on day one, the window of damage might be small and suited for a burst option. We have the Ikelos Sniper, and you'll want 4 times the charm or triple tap in the third column, and high impact reserves in the final. More often than not, there'll be a divinity used, so ammo and magazine refunding perks from hitting crit shots makes for really good burst damage. Distant Tumulus can do some big damage if you have something like extended or tactical mag with clown cartridge procced before doing DPS. This can allow for upwards of 11 shots ready for bursting, and with firing line in the last column, you'll be dealing big DPS. Both Distant Tumulus and the Ikelos Sniper are world drops, so farming these rolls might take you the weeks leading up to Witch Queen to get. There is also Praetor's Revenge from the Vault of Glass raid, which can roll with Rewind rounds and Frenzy, or Rewind rounds and High Impact Reserves, as well as the Supremacy Sniper from the Last Wish raid. This would be the lowest option that I could recommend purely because we just want it for that triple tap perk, but finding a roll with this might be easier than obtaining the other 3 snipers since this sniper has such a small perk pool. Now, we've just talked about the best DPS options for burst situations in case there's a boss in day one that has a really small window of opportunity for damage. If that's not the case, these are 3 snipers worth having ready in case we have a longer damage phase and need some big sustained DPS. Starting off with the sniper rifle from the Deepstone Crypt raid, Succession. You'll be looking for a roll that has reconstruction and preferably a mag increasing option like tactical, appended, or extended, and in the last column either Vorpal Weapon or recombination to help hit big damage numbers. There's also the Long Walk sniper rifle that's farmable from the Prophecy dungeon, and you'll be looking for Clown Cartridge or Overflow to increase the mag size, and firing line in that final column for its increased damage. Lastly is the Azumi RR4 sniper, which drops from Nightfalls or Grandmasters, and if you want the Adept version, then I would start trying to go for that now. You'll want Triple Tap or Clown Cartridge in the third column, and Vorpal Weapon or High Impact Reserves in the last column. These sniper options will do optimal damage if you're using something like Witherhoard or Anarchy ticking at the same time, provided the window for damage is fairly long. Moving on, we have 3 really nice options for rocket launchers. There has been a lot of speculation that rocket launchers are going to be meta next season, either in the form of an anti-champion mod or something to do with the seasonal buff or debuff mod. If Bungie follows the pattern that they've created, then it would make sense after we saw the release of Adored, led to the anti-barrier sniper mod, Salvage's Salvo, which led the Breach and Clear and Unstoppable Grenade Launcher mods, Null Composure, which led to the Unstoppable Fusion Rifle and Particle Deconstruction mods, which leads me to the first option here, our current ritual weapon, Ascendancy. Either 4 of its perk combinations may be extremely valuable on day 1 of Witch Queen's raid. The second rocket launcher to have in your arsenal is from the Vault of Glass raid, the Heathen Vengeance. Preferably a time-lost version if possible for that extra perk variation. But what you're looking for is auto-loading or overflow in that third column, overflow being intrinsic to the time-lost version, and Vorpal Weapon or lasting impression in the fourth column. The last option is technically impossible to farm as it randomly drops from strikes, so I guess either put your Vanguard Prosperity mods and hope for the best, or just get in there and start farming. But it is the Royal Entry rocket launcher. If acquiring the He's and Vengeance from Vault of Glass isn't doable, then this is your next best option, with auto-loading and lasting impression. Worst case scenario, any rocket with auto-loading is worth having if you can't acquire these three in time for Witch Queen, allowing you to shoot a rocket, deal damage with your energy weapon, and then switch back and another rocket is ready to fire off. To this day, swords very much hold a place in the meta for some of the current raids available. There are just some situations that require the perfect sword to cut through packs of adds, take down a major enemy, or just to deal a solid amount of sustained or burst damage to a boss. We have the Zephyr sword that was just reissued with the Dawning, and you'd be hoping you kept one in the vault that has relentless strikes and a cold steel. Mainly if there's a reason that we need to inflict stasis to something during this day 1 raid. I know we've previously had focusing lens twice over this last 12 months, but who knows, it might return, or there might be a different mod in its place. Regardless, it's worth having this sword aside for day 1. The other sword is the almighty Falling Guillotine, an absolute essential to any serious Guardian's arsenal. The combination of Relentless Strikes and Whirlwind Blade is what you want and has been tried and tested for years now. My Falling Guillotine is still my best friend for the first 2 encounters of Garden Salvation. It stays with me when I operate in the first and last encounter of Deepstone Crypt. I hardly find a reason to take it off at all during Last Wish, unless I just want to enjoy some Sleeper Simulant action with this season's debuff mod, but on the flip side, it's completely useless in Vault of Glass due to the Vex Radiolarium pools. This is one of the world drops that I would be going hard in the paint to acquire, even with the recent nerfs to Whirlwind Blade. It holds up and might be needed to cut down a boss or two during Witch Queen's day 1 raid. Something that most people might overlook is the utility and power behind a couple of our heavy grenade launchers. Rolling these 2 options with spike grenades are definitely a worthwhile DPS option when it comes to boss fights. They come equipped with some ad clearing potential, but you can also spam them really quickly during DPS phases that require burst damage. The first is an old classic, the Interference 6, and you'd be looking for something like spike grenades, field prep or auto-loading in that third column, and full court in the final column. This is a world drop, so hopefully RNG is in your favor if you're yet to get one. The other option has only just joined us this season and can be farmed extremely easily through the Umbral Engram system, and that is the Canis Major. This can roll with spike grenades, field prep or clown cartridge in the third column, but Vorpal weapon in the fourth column, making it a bit more of a DPS machine. Fusion rifles are the absolute hotness right now. Yes, I know that we won't have particle deconstruction by our side during Witch Queen's day 1 raid, but that doesn't make fusions completely useless. Bungie has done some fantastic work to buff fusions to make them more viable in PvE. Not to mention that if someone in the fire team throws a tether at a boss, it's going to give you that same 40% debuff that particle deconstruction would have, since the 2 never stacked in this season anyway. It'll feel the same when dealing damage, so it's definitely worth having some fusions ready. Not only that, but fusions are great at killing yellow bars at mid-range, so depending on what encounters we get, they might provide more use than something like a shotgun. The 2 that I'm recommending are probably what everyone's already using at the moment. Last season's ritual weapon, the Null Composure, with either perk in each column being very useful, and Cartesian Coordinate. Anything with Vorpal weapon deals fantastic damage. Hopefully you nab that god roll that Banshee sold a few weeks ago. But like fusion rifles, we were blessed in the current season with their linear counterparts too. Linear's also received some really nice PvE buffs that you'll feel well after particle deconstruction is gone. There are 2 options that I feel like you need to have ready, and if you've been playing this season for the most part, you probably already have them. The first is Threaded Needle, and you'll be looking for something like Clown Cartridge or auto-loading or even Rapid Hit in that third column, and Vorpal Weapon or Frenzy in the fourth column. You can focus these from Umbral Engrams over at the helm. This next option is only obtainable from Trials of Osiris, so if you haven't got a copy yet, hopefully it's on rotation over the next couple of weekends. This is of course Reed's Regret with Triple Tap and Vorpal Weapon, or Triple Tap and Firing Line, one of my personal favorite new weapons from this season. Now, at this point in the video, I'm going to give what I think to be some of the best options for your primary ammo weapons. A lot of these categories are pretty populated with plenty of different archetypes, purposes, and playstyles. What I'll attempt to do is stay in similar fashion as I have all video and offer options that provide the most utility for what a primary ammo gun should do. Kill stuff efficiently, stack damage, and just have the most uptime to slay red bars. To kick things off, I have 3 hand cannons to recommend. I find hand cannons are always a good option for dealing with red bars because you can keep a good distance and tackle them from a nice mid-range. And even though 140 hand cannons are the meta in PvP right now, they're also the best option in PvE too. The absolute god tier option is the time-lost version of Fatebringer from the master difficulty of Vault of Glass. Nonetheless, if you have the normal version of this gun, then explosive payload and Firefly is what you want. Next is the Ice Luna that rolls from the boss encounter from the Grasp of Avarice dungeon. Something like Outlaw or Unrelenting in that third column, and Headstone in the final column will provide some great utility if you're needing to slow down some adds or create some synergies with your Stasis subclass. The last hand cannon that I recommend is actually the curated Nation of Beasts roll from Last Wish. Its curated stats are some of the best for 140 hand cannons, and the synergy of Outlaw and Dragonfly provides an easy to use weapon that does extra AoE damage and also has a fast reload. Just a side note, I know that there's viable options within weapons like Annual Skate, Ancient Gospel, Waking Vigil, and Palindrome, but in one way or another, they are outclassed by the 3 options that I've presented. An example of this is Waking Vigil also rolls with Dragonfly, but Nation of the Beasts rolls with more range and reload speed in its base stats compared to Waking Vigil. Like I mentioned, I'm only going to be pointing at the most optimal options, not the only options. Moving on to ad clearing SMGs. We know that SMGs are amazing at melting red bars at close range, so it's important to have a few options that can do just that. Next season, SMGs can stun overload champions, so that's also been taken into consideration here. First up is one of my all-time favorite SMGs. It's the Extraordinary Rendition, which can be earned from Battlegrounds or focused Umbral engrams. You'd be looking for Subsistence or Overflow in the third column, and Frenzy or One for All in that last column. Next is the Borrowed Time SMG, which can drop at the end of a Gambit match, and similarly, you'll want Overflow or Threat Detector in the third column, and Frenzy or One for All in the final column. And lastly is the Ikelos SMG, which I'm sure a lot of veteran players have kept in their vault from the days that Warmind Cells reigned supreme. For this, you'll want Subsistence or Threat Detector in the third column, and Surrounded for that 4th perk. Much like SMGs, auto rifles will have the ability to stun overload champions next season too, but this time are more useful at taking down adds from a mid to longer range. Both Chroma Rush and Gnawing Hunger have fantastic base stats, and both have the desired perks that you'll want, Subsistence and Rampage. Shadow Price can be farmed from Nightfalls when it's on rotation, and you'll want Overflow and One for All. But lastly is the Arctic Haze, and if you can control the kick on this weapon, then perks like Triple Tap or Outlaw will serve you very well in the third column, and Vorpal Weapon in the final column will provide some nice added damage to those overload champions. Now, in Master Vault of Glass and even Garden of Salvation, there are anti-barrier champions. Bungie has already told us that scout rifles and bows will have anti-barrier mods in Witch Queen, so I think it's worth having some good options for both in case you're forced to do an entire counter with either. For scout rifles, you can pick up the curated role of Night Watch from one of the new light quests in the quest terminal on the tower. It'll give you overflow and explosive payload, although if you've already sharded it by accident, then any role with explosive payload is nice. If you tackle the Shattered Throne dungeon, then you can get a Vouchsafe with Rapid Hit and Vorpal Weapon. Vorpal Weapon being exclusive to only Shattered Throne, drops of this weapon in other Dreaming City activities won't include it. The fan favorite Hung Jury earned from Nightfalls can roll with Rapid Hit in the third column, and either One for All or Explosive Payload are great options for the final column. Eternal Blazon is a great arc alternative to Hung Jury by mirroring it with Rapid Hit and One for All also. Lastly, from Vault of Glass is preferably the time-lost version of Vision of Confluence with Rewind rounds in that third column and Firefly or Frenzy in the last column. Servant Leader has plenty of great options too, but might be hard to secure an exact role with how RNG it is to land one, let alone the perk combinations that you might want. The counterpart to anti-barrier scouts are anti-barrier bows. Whispering Slab with Vorpal weapon is perfect in the kinetic slot due to the recent buff to Vorpal on primary ammo weapons, although it is a wall drop, so cross those fingers for some good luck. If you can't be bothered farming for a reliable bow, then you can even head over to the weapons kiosk on the tower, because you can actually buy a perfectly curated Point of the Stag that features 4 great perks, namely Vorpal weapon for our champions. Lastly, Imperial Needle can be farmed through Umbral engrams, and having Frenzy in the last column will add some nice welcome damage for removing those barriers. And to finish off the list, we'll go through the exotic weapons that are a must for any day 1 raid. I can almost guarantee that at least one of these will be used to help get somebody a clear on day 1. With about 2 weeks left till Witch Queen, but about 3 weeks till day 1 raid, it's worth grabbing those exotic cipher quests from Zoe each weekend if you haven't nabbed any of these weapons from the exotic kiosk. Witherhoard and Anarchy are great for trapping ads in their spawning location, or for covering an area of ground to give you some space. But more importantly, planting either of these weapons on a boss allows you to switch to another energy weapon and deal damage while they're ticking away. Lament, Aga's Scepter, and Galahorn can all be obtained through different exotic quests from Beyond Light, Season of the Lost, and the 30th Anniversary DLC respectively. Lament has been proven to be the burst DPS king for swords, making its name to fame from the Atrax encounter in Deepstone Crypt. Aga's Scepter, much like Trinity Ghoul, will be a fantastic way to deal with large groups of ads, and with the freeze time will give you some breathing space to keep composed on day 1. Galahorn will be a must if rocket launchers do enter the meta for damage, thanks to a seasonal debuff or buff mod. All you'll need is one fireteam member to run it, while the other 5 can use different rocket launchers but still benefit from the Wolfpack rounds. Divinity, 1,000 Voices, Vex Mythoclast, and Eyes of Tomorrow are all from the current 4 raids. Besides Divinity, which requires a quest and some additional work within the raid, the other 3 have random chances at dropping. If you haven't raided this week and you run 3 characters, then you have exactly 15 chances to acquire these 3 raid weapons if you do all 3 each week across all 3 characters. I'd recommend you start ASAP, because there's been some horror stories of people doing upwards of 70 runs of a single raid without getting the exotic to drop from it. Divinity provides a very large crit bubble for the team to DPS at, whilst also providing a 40% debuff to the enemy that it's on. 1,000 Voices is extremely popular right now, but can also serve as a great DPS option or yellow bar clearer, even without particle deconstruction. Vex Mythoclast comes with the utility of also being a linear fusion rifle, whilst also dealing big damage at range to clear ads. And Eyes of Tomorrow has been tried and tested as one of the best weapons to clear either Mars or Venus during the Gatekeeper's encounter in Vault of Glass. It may have a similar use in the Day 1 Witch Queen raid. Whisper of the Worm and Outbreak Perfected are maybes for me at the moment, because they're only viable if you have the catalyst, and if you need to buy them, then there's 0 chance that you have the catalyst, because their respective missions were vaulted. Bungie has said that their catalyst will drop with Witch Queen, but we won't know if they'll drop in time for us to get it for day 1 raid. Lastly, I would recommend Izanagi's Burden, Tractor Cannon, Trinity Ghoul, Sleeper Simulant, and Arbalist. Each of these have their own unique way of providing utility to the team, either being strong for DPS, being a debuff, being an ad clearer, providing solid damage, or being able to handle with anti-barriers or just breaking shields. Each of these are worthwhile having in your arsenal when day 1 Witch Queen rolls around. And that just about sums up the video, guys. This is my extensive list of every weapon that I think that you'll need for when the day 1 raid for Witch Queen rolls around. Like I said, you don't want to be that guardian who rocks up on day 1 without having everything prepared possible. If you have everything from this list, or at least one thing from each category, you can be safely assured that you will have some sort of utility that your fire team might need. And as always, take it easy, Guardians.